Live stream microphone check, 2, 3. Live stream check.
Good evening, colleagues. Can I welcome you to this meeting of the Scrutiny panel. In the event of an emergency, we should know what to do. There are no practice evacuations planned for this evening, but if the alarm sounds, please evacuate the town hall by going down the main staircase or the secondary staircase to the high street, whichever is appropriate, and then to the car park behind you. The room has been slightly reconfigured this evening. As you'll know, there is a virulent influenza bug doing the rounds that's putting significant pressure on our local hospital already. So we thought we would play our part by separating the tables just a little more than is usual. Also, it's well known that one of the political parties had a Beano last week, at which they were all huddled together with inevitable consequences, but we know what those were from COVID. The Scrutiny panel is a non-political panel. Clearly, we all have our own political views on every item that is discussed, but this is essentially a non-political panel where we are here to ensure that decisions and recommendations going forward to Cabinet are soundly based in their assumptions, the proper procedures have been followed, they're consistent with the budget and the strategic plan. So if we can try and keep blatant politicking to the absolute minimum, I would appreciate that. We maintain a cordial and friendly and often quite informal relationship with our officers who are assisting us to understand the issues, and we find that is the best way of proceeding. Although, of course, the panel does have draconian powers under the Local Government Act 2000 to demand to see any paper that is relevant to an item being scrutinised, and oblige any officer or member of the council to appear before us and ask any relevant question other than those which would not be permitted in a magistrate's court. This meeting is being broadcast live over the internet on the council's YouTube channel and will be available to watch afterwards. Discreet use of mobile phones and other devices is welcome, but you're requested to keep them to silent and not use voice or flash camera. We will break at 7:30 if the meeting hasn't finished, and then continue to 9 o'clock, where we will decide whether we wish to continue. I'm Councillor Dennis Willits. I represent the Lexton and Braeswick ward. I'm Vice Chairman of the panel, officiating in the absence of the Chairman. If members would kindly introduce themselves, starting with Councillor Bourne on my far left.
Councillor Bourne, Newtown and Christchurch Ward, and I'm substituting for Councillor Rippingale.
Councillor Claire Osborne for Shrub End Ward.
Councillor William Sunnox, I'm from Rural North Ward and I'm substituting for Councillor Darius Laws, who's got the lurgy.
Councillor Thomas Rowe, Rural North Ward.
Lucy Bredman, Strategic Director.
Owen Howell, Democratic Services Officer.
Councillor Paul Smith, St Anne's and St John's Ward.
Councillor Vanessa Moffat, Smile End Ward.
Good evening, Councillor Mark Corey, visiting as portfolio holder for Assets and Resources.
Good evening, Anna D'Alessandro, Interim Section 151 and Chief Finance Officer.
Wayne Layton, Financial Planning and Budget Specialist.
And in the public gallery, we have several of our chief officers and the leader of the council who are most welcome to scamper forward and take the vacant chair if and when they have anything significant to add to the proceedings, as I'm sure they will. Substitutions, we've already dealt with those. Councillor Bourne has indicated. There are no urgent matters brought to my attention. Declarations of interest, anyone? No declarations. Minutes of the meeting held 11th of November. Are those agreed? Thank you. General, have your say. There are no members of the public or members of the council registering. Item 8, decisions taken under special urgency provisions. There are none. Cabinet or portfolio holder decisions called in for review. There are none. Item 10, A and B, requests for new items. I'm not aware of any. Have any been recorded to the clerk? None have been recorded. That takes us on to the first item, which is a visit by Councillor Corey, who is the portfolio holder for resources, which fits in well with the main item of business, item 12 rather, which is a first look at the draft budget for 2026-27. Mark, 10 minutes on what you're doing and how you're steering the ship.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Dennis. I don't know if you recall, I think last year I gave you a full PowerPoint slide or slides presentation. This year I think we've had so much work on the budget that I'm going to give you more of a minimal run through. And also I'm a frequent sort of attendee of governance and audit and ensure that there's constant scrutiny really of my portfolio. We also have some member involvement, for example, on the estate members group, which I'll come back to. So for me, the three priorities this year have been mainly upon the rolling out of the corporate landlord model and really getting that to a point where we are reaping our rewards in the investment into that model, and I can come back to that. Secondly, it has been getting to grips with the capital programme and ensuring it is manageable and it is reflecting what our priorities are and what is realistically achievable with local government reorganisation coming and a stop to spending that will happen within a year or so. And finally, balancing a budget in what continue to be really difficult economic circumstances for local government. And that third point, really, Chair and panel, will be covered by the next item, which we have excellent officers here to support me on that, and I will take full part in that part of the conversation. So I am pleased to say we're getting close to a balanced budget, and I will introduce the next item and explain more on that one. So on the first 2 points, the corporate landlord model and the capital programme, I think that's where I'll focus most of my initial sort of reviews of my portfolio and then open myself up to questions. So I do feel that we are really getting to grips with our assets to the point where we are now delivering better income from the leases that we have reviewed. We've gone through scores of leases, starting with the most commercially advantageous that we felt we could re-gear, review, and we have derived revenue income from that, which has also seen the capital value of some of our assets increase. And we are going through as many as we can. The team are at full capacity to try and ensure we have the best deal for the council taxpayer. And of course, every lease and every organisation we deal with, whether it is commercial or, thank you, Richard, whether it's commercial or voluntary, we try and get the best for the council taxpayer, but we also are aware of each situation as it comes up. And what we have found going through the leases as well is there are some examples and some options where, in fact, we can look at disposal. We can look at agreeing that, in fact, we can take a capital receipt and discontinue that lease and allow them to take the property over altogether. In some examples, we've looked at extending leases and gaining extra value, and in other cases, we've even looked at a deal where we're perhaps extending the land take in one example, so that we can get more capital value out of that as well. So I really want to praise Patricia and her team. So Patricia is here tonight. Those I directly deal with underneath her as well, Lee Rainsforth, who has been doing a lot of work up at Colchester Northern Gateway, and Rob Williams as well, who's been doing a lot of work on some of the most recent disposal and sort of lease deals. So I do think we are in so much of a better position. We now know what we are clearly, what are our problems. We know what our opportunities are. We are absolutely aware of our assets, and it comes down also to some important work on safety and assurance and knowing what state our assets are in as well. Also understanding when it comes to investment or changes in leases or disposals. We know if a building is going to require further work with some environmental changes that are coming down the tracks, and we can absolutely look at what the worth would be in investing further in an asset or disposing of the asset. So I want to thank the team for their work on that on the asset programme, and we will continue to update the members estate group who see all of the information that I am seeing on the properties, whether it's lease or whether it's disposal, and that information is confidential, but all members on the group can see that, and I'm happy when times are appropriate to further brief groups on that information to keep them updated, because I think it's really important that members understand the assets we have, how we can sweat those assets, but also if we are going to dispose of those assets, is there anything politically sensitive? Are there reasons why some members may suggest that's not the approach? I've always been of the approach that I believe the council should own assets and should be able to sweat those assets, should be able to use those assets in a way that benefits the residents of Colchester, but I also see reasons for disposal with the finances where they are in local government today, with LGR coming down the pipeline, that actually it's right at times to sell and dispose of some of these assets. So the members of states groups have seen certain examples that are coming through, and we have a number of cabinet meetings in the new year, the first in January, where the disposals will come, and Scrutiny will see them first. So you will see some of those papers coming to you in the first meeting of the new year, where we can talk in further detail about those specifically and in the confidential parts of the agenda. The last point I'll just talk about, Chair, is the capital programme. We had a briefing recently with Councillor Sunnox as the shadow representative of the portfolio. I represent the assets and resources portfolio, and with the Conservative leader, Paul Dundas, to talk through how we are the processes we're taking and the outcomes of that in terms of the capital programme, and how we do believe, the leader and I in particular, have been, it's been something we have known has taken time to get full control in terms of understanding the slippage and why there are constant issues with slippage, why we leave some programmes on there for an amount of time when we believe actually they're not deliverable. So I think we've got to a much better place, and that's enabling us to understand how to how to forecast our debt, how to look at reducing that forecast debt, how to manage it in terms of the disposals programme, reducing some of the financial costs to the capital programme we've had in the past and in the future, and reducing the MRP, the minimum revenue provision costs that come with it. So I am, again, much more confident, thanks to the work of Anna's team and Hussein as well, who have been going through that capital programme, and I think we're in a much better place, having looked at how we can take some items out, one example being the waste vehicles, whether to lease or whether to buy, and other examples where we've taken out schemes that have not been delivered and will not be delivered in the time frame before LGR. And it is much better, and that's why we're confident presenting this budget alongside both a revenue and a capital programme. And I think we are in a similar place in terms of members around the political spectrum, that we are managing the capital programme better and we're managing that asset programme better as well. I'll leave it there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Can I kick off with a question to you about your portfolio, and that is how you plan for emergencies. We have various types of emergency. We have emergencies that are not emergencies, such as the climate emergency, where there is no specific budget and nothing really seems to be done. Then at the full council meeting recently, we had the motion on domestic abuse housing covenant, where it appeared that there was considerable work, additional work needed doing, and it was within the scope of Cabinet to do that work. And to me, that was that is tantamount to an emergency. So, can you explain to us, how do you deal with the things which are sort of just on the verge of the portfolio, either coming in, such as the domestic abuse issue, or sort of going out as sort of climate emergency, which doesn't seem to be all that urgent nowadays? What is your process for identifying these issues, and more importantly, getting budget behind things like domestic abuse, so that it is possible for the council to make a difference?
Thank you, Chair. That's an interesting one. I'd say, number one, emergency planning does have a part, and that is in the portfolio of Chris Pearson. There was a question the other night about emergency planning, and it depends what you're classing emergency as. But there are officers who do plan for the emergencies and plan as best as possible for the unknown, known, or the unknown unknowns. And I think I said to the leader the other night, and he talked about it publicly, that when we have had emergencies such as COVID, we worked incredibly well with partners to address that. And I remember sort of sitting with Richard Block at the time, and we talked about how quickly we were able to get our officers to be working online and at home with equipment. So I think we are pretty able to flex and adapt to emergencies. But in some of the examples that you've given, I think it will come down to contingencies in terms of if we are going to have to outlay for equipment in an emergency, or if we are going to have to look at changing policy, for example in CBH. In that particular example, I was looking at that motion and it talked about a dedicated officer. Now, what we would need to do first of all is to look at, can we appoint a dedicated officer that is from the current team already to have that particular focus, and hopefully not take further revenue resource. But if it is needed to appoint or give a sort of new position to someone, then we'd have to look at how we find that from within the service budget. In terms of the budget that we are going to talk about next, where there are increases, we have to look at where we need to decrease other spending within budgets, and we usually do that within a service budget, within a department. But if, for example, in waste, we looked at how we could increase through the garden waste charge. So you can increase fees, you can bring in income to balance off revenue costs that come in. So I'd say that there's contingencies, and Anna last year put aside a £1 million contingency that if our service budgets and other emergencies cause us to go over, and we know that temporary accommodation, for example, those costs have continued to rise despite the good work done by the previous portfolio holder, Councillor Smith, who's in this room, and the current portfolio holder, we still have to manage down those costs. But those contingencies are put into the budget, and we do also then have the reserves, some of which are earmarked for particular services and particular areas, for example, the upkeep of our buildings. But again, we need to continue to put money into those because each year we will need to cover repairs. One other example, which has been in the headlines recently, would be down at the Quay, King Edward Quay, and we're, as you may have heard, improving the licensing scheme down there, clearing up the area, and it has caused some controversy. Let's be honest about it. But we're trying to get people to work to a better model, which will have better insurance and assurance, so we can cover the costs. Because the small type of emergency I would allude to there is when boats sink, and we have to clear up that, and we have to clear up the cost. We foot the bill, which is in the last few years has been £140,000 of a number of different boats that have sunk and then have needed to be cleared up by the people responsible for the river, which is ultimately us. So in those cases, we are burdened by those costs, and we have to make them up. And what I would say is that we're not going to make it up by a handful of new licenses, but what we will have in the future is a better system, like with the corporate landlord model across our more physical assets and buildings. The key will also be much better managed to manage those emergencies in a better way going forward, because a boat should have its assurance, it should have a certificate of what's the word? Floatability is not the word, but you know what I mean. Seaworthiness, thank you, Chair. So it's those kind of things where we're getting better management in place to at least reduce some of those unknowns. So that's my long answer to you. Thank you.
And my second final question is on the corporate landlord model. The results coming out of this seem quite amazing, and the question I have is, why did we not pitch into this sort of last year, the year before that? I mean, are there reasons why now is the time to do the corporate landlord model, but over the last 2 or 3 years it's not been the right time to make these significant savings? I mean, are there any drivers which meant now is the only time that it was possible to start that project, and that it was not possible to do it previously?
Thank you, Chair. Another good question. I think we all have parts in our lives where we wish we'd done something earlier. And we have sort of lent into this or pitched into it, as you say. I would say sort of 18 months this journey has been sort of started. So I would say that we're now seeing the fruits of our labour. So I would say it was started earlier, but it's taken a lot of time to get to grips with our assets, to go through and review. I must say we are seeing fruits now, but when Patricia came to me and said, you're going to have to pay out this much for this fire safety certificate here, you have other certificates here, you need to make sure this building is kept up, you know, there's a number of the issues we first found in terms of assets. And I will be honest, I think it's down to years of cuts to local government funding, meaning we just couldn't keep up with the maintenance that we needed to do to some of our buildings. And we are lucky, but on the flip side unlucky, in Colchester to have such fantastic historical assets. and we need to continue to fund them and continue to maintain them. And this building itself is a wonderful building, but it's going to cost us, and it's in the budget, it's in the capital programme, it's going to cost us multiple millions of pounds just to repair the building, not to do anything in terms of development for the future. It is to just keep it going. And the same when we refer, if we do, to Leisure World as an example, where we need to invest because it is a money maker, but it's a place where people enjoy visiting, it's a place where people keep fit and healthy. But it is going to cost us to keep it going. So I would say that we are seeing the fruits of our labour with the corporate landlord model. As I expressed earlier, I'm very proud of Patricia and her team for the work that has been done, helping us to straighten out leases that we have, to straighten out commercial deals. We know that Colchester Northern Gateway has been difficult, but we are getting there, and we have, I think, councillors across the table talked about how we do see a future that is brighter up there, but it has taken time. So my honest answer is yes, I would have done it earlier if we had the opportunity. We have faced different challenges along the last 4 or 5 years that we've had to tackle, and this was an area we wanted to tackle, as I said, linked to the capital programme. Both David as leader and formerly as the resources portfolio when I was leader, we knew we needed to tackle this issue, and I'm glad we've got to it now. It has taken an investment of time, effort and money up front, but now it is reaping the benefits.
Thank you. Colleagues, have you got a question? Do we go around the table? Councillor Bourne, have you got any questions? Councillor Osborne? Councillor Sunnox?
Yes. You said that the disposal programme will be reducing our debt. Do you have numbers for where our debt is going over the period of the plan? And do you have any feeling whether that's sustainable? If you take the numbers which are there and you add them together, you get to the debt going from about 150, 160 million net up to about 350 million. Have you looked at that and thought about it? We say we've done the capital programme, but have we done really done the capital programme when, we're selling £41 million worth of investments and we're investing 51 million in the general fund? Then in the HRA, we're investing goodness knows what else, on cash flows that sort of don't work. Have you looked at that? Have you thought about it?
Thank you. I have thought about it, and I think about it because you regularly make us think about it, William, which is not a negative thing. And we have run through, I remember being at Governance and Audit last, where we did run through the HRA finances and heard again from Savills what their expert opinion was. So, yes, I have looked at it, and I wrote down in my notes here that for me, there is a number of different components here. There's our capital programme, and within taking the HRA to one side, I'm looking at our capital programme, and I believe it's manageable, and I believe that we're doing a number of things. We're investing, and we're going to invest to save. We are investing in renewal and updating properties that we have to do, but we're also disposing, and I think that's going. There's a healthy balance there of not just looking at new borrowing, it is looking at how we can also balance out and reduce some of those financing costs over time. The HRA, I absolutely understand you continue to feel that it doesn't satisfy you, but I have been satisfied by Savills' advice and explanation, and by my understanding of the way the HRA works. It is significant amounts of investment and debt, but it is also balanced against an asset, and that asset is 6,000 properties. And I know it doesn't work, it's almost a book exercise. It doesn't work in so much in the practical sense. We're not going to sell off those properties. But for me, having listened through the process that we've taken with the HRA, I am confident in those figures and that advice from Savills. I do understand, and I always do listen to your challenge, and I appreciate your expertise, and will continue to listen to that. But when it comes to the answer, I would say I'm as confident as I can be listening to our officers and listening to the advice of the specialists in the area, whether that be Savills on the HRA or whether that is our Treasury Management advisors when it comes to that.
Can I just request that when we get the final budget, can we have a debt projection so that it's there for everyone to see? I think that's a reasonable thing for councillors to ask, particularly with so many stories of councils diving into deep debt and the speed at which a lot of councils are diving into debt since the brakes were taken off HRA borrowing in 2018.
I think we do show as much as possible. But Wayne, are you able to help with that, please?
Yeah, it's already in annexes 4 and 6, so the capital programme, which is where we take our borrowing. It shows you the amount of borrowing that we're taking.
Sorry, where? Which tables?
So Annex 4 is General Fund Capital Programme, Annex 6 is the HRA Capital Programme.
Yes, it shows the amount that of the capital expenditure that is from debt, but we need to actually show councillors what the debt will have grown to as a consequence of our capital programme in total. So we've got 160 million, and councillors need to know how much that debt's going to increase to by the end of the 5-year period under these plans. How much will it have grown to then?
In the general fund, it's another 40 million.
It's 51 million of the capital expenditures funded from debt, and in the HRA it's about 150 million, I think. So we've got those figures, but we need to see very simply those added together as to what the total debt will be so that councillors can see it. It's really important that we understand that we're approving a budget that dives us, more than doubles our debt, and that's worrying.
Is this information available? Or will it be available over the course of the next
On page 95 of the document, page 95, 118, we do have the HRA capital programme, Annex 6, as Wayne referred to, and it does show from years 26-27 all the way through to 2030-31, and it does show a total.
Yes, it shows 138 million of extra borrowing. What I'm asking is that we add that to the existing borrowing, and we add the general fund debt to the existing general fund debt. It's very easy, but we need to lay it out for councillors, as councillors need to know the scale of debt that we're incurring. It's vital.
Thank you, Wayne. So that's something we can take away. Yeah, thank you.
So that will be a note to accompany the budget, or will it be a note circulated to the scrutiny panel?
We'll add it into the budget report.
It'll be part of the budget report. Thank you. Is that all, Councillor Sunnox, at this stage?
I think you're going to be taking us through the sections, so I'll keep my questions for that.
Yes, I mean, you come back to these under the formal scrutiny of the budget, which we have yet to get to. Councillor Rowe, any questions?
Well, I suppose as we're talking about the general fund and the reserves, can I ask a question along those lines at this point, or do you want me to wait until later? I'm quite happy to wait.
At the moment, we're just looking at the overall portfolio of Councillor Corey, and then we're going to scrutinise the information that we have to hand on the budget, and let's not mix the two up.
In that case, Chair,
it's always good to try to get a question in first, but let's try and respect the order of the agenda, if that's okay. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. First of all, I need to declare an interest, given that the portfolio holder talked about leases being renewed. I am a treasurer of the St Anne's Community Association, which is currently having a lease reviewed. So I need to declare that, I think, as a interest for the record. It's a non-pecuniary one.
Yep. So we note that, and just check with the clerk that everything is in order there.
Yes, as the panel won't be asked to actually make a decision regarding that lease renewal, then yeah, that's fine. It's been declared, so I'll make a note of that and it'll go into the record. But Councillor Smith can stay.
And we note Councillor Smith's sterling work in support of his communities.
Thank you. My question to the portfolio holder, given that we are meant to be looking at his performance as a portfolio at this stage and not the budget, is as part of local government reform, there will come a time when the council will be unable to dispose of assets. We don't know yet precisely when that time will be. How confident is he that we can deliver the suggestions that he's coming up with under those constraints? Or will we find that unfortunately we are unable to dispose of assets because the government has decided, due to LGR, that we're not able to do so, or can only do so if we have the support of the new authority, whatever that might be?
Thank you, Paul. So I am confident that we can achieve the figure that we've set out, which is the £40 million of asset disposal. We are dealing with some of those now. Some of those are coming to Cabinet tomorrow evening. One of the reports has actually been removed because of interest in the site, and we need to make sure we are doing the right thing as per the Constitution. But it's good to have multiple interests in certain assets and certain sites, and we hope to derive the best value possible when disposing of them. So I am confident, and Patricia sits here confidently as well, saying that we will deliver on that. We believe have been slightly conservative in terms of what we think we can deliver, but in terms of we can deliver some in year, we believe, and most in 26-27, and then we'll start flirting with the LGR dates, indeed, as you say. So I know that this programme will be deliverable because we have the assets and we have the interest in assets, and we have interest coming forward in assets, as I say, where we have a lease agreement so far, and we are looking at the potential to sell some of those. So we have offers coming forward at different times, but we also have, for example, Northern Gateway, where we are going out to the market ourselves, and we are looking for either conditional or unconditional bids. Unconditional bids will help us deliver quicker to that programme and more confidently. You may get conditional bids that rely on planning, and they would be higher in terms of value, which is great. But if we need to rely on planning, which may take a year, complications with the development that the interested party may have, we might want to take the slightly lower amount as an unconditional and bank it. So I'm confident in the assets that we have on the disposal list, with the interest that we have in other assets on our books, that we can deliver the 40 million programme.
Thank you very much. And can I also, whilst we're talking about performance, record my personal satisfaction with the improved quality of financial information and the timeliness that we've been getting in the recent year, and for the staff that have been involved in that. So thank you very much for that.
Might I ask a supplementary on that particular issue? It's not wholly clear to some of us that local government reorganisation is in fact going to take place. Are you including a probability, or perhaps a probability density function, on the decisions that are coming along to assess what is the best path forward for various scenarios of local government being delayed by 2 years, 4 years, never? Because it does seem, we talk about it as though it's a certainty which will have significant impact and holding factors on what can be done with the budget, but it's not absolutely clear that it is even going to happen. So I just wondered how you are dealing with those probabilities and scenarios in your decisions about how we move forward with the finance portfolio.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Dennis. So, just to say, linked to the disposal programme, I believe that the disposal programme is moving ahead for the right reasons, and it will contribute to good financial stability for the council going forward into LGR. Whether LGR was happening or not, I would still recommend this disposal programme. So in that situation, there are good reasons to carry out these things regardless of LGR. I would say that, and the leader would back me up, when larger decisions, whether it be strategy or operational, are coming to Cabinet, almost every discussion says, how will LGR affect this? How are we going to work with our partners? Now, we have talked about working with partners over the last 10 years because we've had to, with the decreasing government revenue settlement. So we do continue to work with partners. We've had relationships across boundaries, across Essex, in order to work more efficiently. So we are going to look to that no matter what with LGR. But I would say that I was there at Essex County Council as a member of that authority too back in January when most members voted for LGR. I did not. I voted against it because the offer that I saw on the table was too rushed. I had no answers to Thurrock's debt. I had no answers to how we would balance out the different services and council taxes. Answers that we still don't have necessarily. So I'm still cautious of this process. However, having said that, I believe it is happening. And I believe the way that this government is pushing through some of its key policies, it does believe in this local government reorganisation, and I believe it is a certainty. I believe it is more certain to happen than not, and I believe it is towards the higher end of certainty. So I think it is worth working with the partners as best as possible. I know that David has been well placed, and Pam Donnelly is the Chief Executive, and in Pam's place, both Lindsay and Richard, who are here this evening, have really taken part in those discussions, again, about how to best place ourselves within Essex, how to best work with the different authorities across Essex and the partners in health and police, etc. So I think those discussions are happening, they're genuine, and David meets with the other CEOs and leaders of Tendring and Braintree as our closest partners and most likely partners in an LGR scenario. So that work is happening, and there's positives that come out of that work, whether LGR definitely happens or not. But in this case, Chair, if the leader has come to the table, because he is the strategic lead on LGR, you might want to just ask him to finish the answer to that question if that suits.
Yes, I think we would appreciate it. I mean, if the answer is that one's not thinking about probabilistic strategies for the future where there might or might not be. I mean, if we're just assuming it will happen, then clearly we act accordingly. But sort of the insurance risk type calculation would seem to be a cautious approach to the future financial programmes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mark. Mark has described it as I would, but having been in the circles of conversation across the county over the last few days since the genuinely unexpected no notice declaration that we'll be not having a mayoral election in the spring of next year, and therefore what we will have is a non-mayoral combined county authority, I can tell you that cynicism is shared, but we are also, after the moment of digestion, all of us from cross-party, cross-authority, past it. On Friday at Essex Leaders and Chief Execs, we were listening and talking to, and I have to say I was to the point around the effect of that announcement on confidence across the Essex system, as will be true elsewhere. We've had assurances there. Councillor Bentley, who spoke to this today at the County Council, Mark and I are both there, has been talking to ministers and senior officials, as have ours in turn. So put all that together, we're right to have a caution till this is done, because until it is, it's not. But in terms of a baseline on which we proceed, it's as close to a certainty as we're going to get. LGR makes sense if we're going to deliver well, or as well as funding will allow for our residents. That alone is a driver for this and any government to push us towards unitarisation for the benefits it should provide and the opportunities we know it can provide. So, no bet is 100%, is it? But it's absolutely a high confidence baseline against which we should plan and we should aim to deliver. I've got one extra thing, if I might just say this, Chair, which is the point around disposals and the limits on what will happen when we've got a shadow authority, when we're forming up for LGR and in parallel for devolution. The evidence I've seen across the country is that what happens is within the framework that's provided by government, the new authority, it works with the existing one. So as that forms up, we are in that process of transition and understanding. So there will be every reason for good sense disposals, if they were delayed, and with no reason to think that they will, to have the blessing of the new unitary. And at the moment, of course, we're at the heart of that prospective new unitary, although we're waiting for the final confirmation of how many districts will be forming up with our portion of the county council. We know each other well enough to know that what is working now in planning for the future should continue to. So I have confidence in that as well. I hope that's a little help.
Yes, that clears the matter. Councillor Moffat, you have any questions?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just one. And building on your earlier question before about the corporate landlord model, I know you mentioned one benefit earlier on, but what benefits are you seeing already from introducing the corporate landlord model?
Thank you. So, yeah, it is delivering value in a number of different ways. So it's delivering value in terms of we are much more aware of the conditions of our properties. We've got a much better maintenance program now of our properties. We know the cost that it's going to take to keep for the upkeep for some of them, to ensure they're environmentally meeting the standards that are needed. So that's one part of the value. Secondly, we're deriving more value from the leases that we are renegotiating and reviewing as we go. So that's really important. So it's deriving both revenue, income, and a sort of capital uplift in terms of value of the asset. Then we are deriving value in terms of the disposal program. So we are bringing in capital, we're bringing in capital receipts, and as has been explained, and I will continue to explain later, we are using that, and I know this has cross-party support, that we are using those capital receipts to help offset our capital program debt and to look at the financial costs of that debt and the MRP, which is the minimum revenue provision that we have to allocate when spending, when borrowing and spending against assets. So for those reasons, we are definitely bringing in more income. We are more aware of our asset base, and it's to some extent it's an exciting part of my portfolio because we get to look at the commercial deals. I have confidence in Patricia, and I have confidence in the team that she's brought around her. Lee Rainforth's experience has really helped at Northern Gateway. Rob Williams' experience has helped across the piece in Bella leases and in commercial deals in terms of the asset disposal program as well. So we're in a much better place as a result. We're going to see the value in terms of enjoyment when people get to use the new cinema and the Northern Gateway when it's fully functioning, and the other options we have up there, which I hope will come to fruition when contracts are signed and the communications goes out, and people enjoying an updated leisure world when we get there. I think we spoke earlier about the investment into leisure world and how that is staged and how we're still working through the options about what needs to be done. But that also, referring back to your questions, Chair, looking at Leisure World, we made a decision that we can't go for a complete full development of the site within the timeframes of LGR that we believe are coming down the tracks. And instead, we believe that we should look at the asset as it is, see what is realistic about investing in that wonderful place that could be even better for our residents to enjoy. The one last thing I'd say, which I'm really proud of as well, is the play park scheme. So investing £2 million into play parks across the city, something announced in last year's budget, and now that the corporate landlord team have done the operational piece of checking which playgrounds need updating, how much money can be spread across the city to cover as many playgrounds as possible, and the initial tranche are getting going early in the new year, and we'll be proud to see that happening. It's such a good programme that the central government decided they're going to follow our lead and invest in programmes to update play parks as well. And Patricia, I hope we can try and squeeze a bit of money out of central government to donate towards even more playgrounds in Colchester being updated. So value in terms of money for the council, but value in terms of enjoyment for our people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any final questions to Councillor Corey? Well, can we thank you, Mark, for coming along? It's always delightful to have you in the hot seat, because you have all the facts at your fingertips, and it shows an accomplished control of your portfolio. There are no decisions we make on this item, because clearly you're not bringing any decisions for us to review. But we thank you for your attendance, and wish you well in the rest of the budget process. Thank you. We now move to item 12, which is scrutinisation of the draft budget report. This is a fairly new item in the scrutiny panel's programme of work. In previous years, we've really learnt about the budget from the workshops and from a formal scrutiny panel ahead of the January or February cabinet meeting. This year, we are being given a glimpse of what's in the budget, well ahead of the decisions, and this ties in with the way Cabinet is also considering the matter and doing a little more in the open than in the past. So we have an opportunity to hear about the budget, the shape of the budget, and the way it is developing. But I must caution the panel that this is not the formal presentation of the budget, which will take place as usual after Christmas. This is just a starter so that we can understand the general shape and how the budget is being put together. So anyone who was hoping that this will be a full presentation with every annex, every T crossed and every I dotted will be a little disappointed this evening. But we should be encouraged by the fact that the information is being made available. We have an early opportunity to give a view on how the budget is being put together, to test any of the assumptions that are there, and that is the purpose of this particular item. So it's back to you, Mark, this time to present the preview of the budget.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll do a short presentation, then hand to Anna, who absolutely will give you everything she can. But I do think it is like a preview, the red carpet. We are outlining the budget, and I hope you aren't disappointed. I hope you are actually impressed, because I am, in terms of the fact that we are coming earlier than before with a more substantial set of financial documents, I think, than we've achieved before. Typically it is, as you just announced, more of a guiding direction, but I think we've got more detail than ever before for you to scrutinise, and for councillors to continue to scrutinise as we look at how it fully lands. So we still have a gap to close. We still have fundamentally the fair funding review settlement from central government still to land, and then in the new year, once those items have sort of come together, we will be able to present that final polished budget. We've also had public consultation, and we've sort of reviewed some of those outcomes, and we will continue to talk with councillors and the opposition about what ideas and what changes they would like to see. So I am really pleased to introduce this budget paper to you. I think it's a really helpful and accomplished budget paper. I liked the way, reading through it, that it was more of a narrative and it was more explanatory than perhaps before. I think it takes you through and helps explain why and what we do, and then gives clearly the evidence of the figures throughout the different annexes as well. So I think it's earlier, it's clearer, and it's deeper than what we've done before, and that gives me confidence. Anna and her team and Wayne here this evening as well have given me confidence in the way that this has been put together. I'll just explain some of the process, and I know Anna will continue to add detail on this. Anna and Wayne have led the process, which has seen the Senior Leadership Board and budget squads go through what we have seen as deeper, fit for the future work, which is, I would say, transformational. We are on a transformation where we must, due to financial factors beyond our control, we must continue to pare down and be as tight as possible with our budgets here in Colchester. We are well managed here financially, and we will continue to be. We will not take our eye off the ball. And we've talked before with opposition members as how they believe that some of the amendments they passed last year sort of show that we're listening and we're doing similar things. We are keeping a tighter rein on the capital programme, as mentioned before, and we have to keep a tighter rein on our revenue. Starting with around a £3 million budget gap is what we forecast. And then looking at that more deeply, it's around the similar amount, but we've had to understand budget pressures as well of around £2.5 million, which have added to that gap. So we've had to really look at transformation to bring that gap down to almost closing. I won't talk about any more detail, and I'll leave Anna to do that. But I would say we are still waiting for the government's fair funding review. I believe the 17th of December is now the date that we should receive it, so not long. We keep guessing about what it will be, whether it will be positive, neutral or negative, and we have scenarios we've planned for each of those. So I once again want to thank all the officers that have taken part in building this budget. It really has been across the services with those budget squads that have been led by sort of a multidisciplinary team in each case. And I did really appreciate working with Wayne across the portfolios to ensure, and it was a really well organised programme. And that comes again from Anna's leadership, and we're grateful for her strong, determined leadership, to the point where I did say to Anna, she's been telling me for a good year or so the negatives and how we need to make changes and the things we need to do, to the point where she's telling me many more positives now, and things are much clearer to members, I think, now in the financial papers, and I think it's clearer that we are on a good trajectory for balancing this budget and for investing in the borough going forward, but in a realistic manner that sets us up for stability. Whether or not LGR comes, Chair, we will be in a better place. So I commend this draft budget to you, and I pass to Anna for more detail.
May I, Chair? Good evening, members, and thank you very much, Councillor Corey, for your kind words. I'm pleased to present this draft budget and medium-term financial forecast to the committee, as we've already discussed, a month and a half earlier than what you would normally see it. It is, despite being earlier, it is detailed, it is robust, and it is deliverable. The detail can be found in 35 pages of the report, 8 tables and 6 annexes of detail. It is, I wrote a number of times in the report, the unprecedented nature in which we find ourselves in this budget process. Unprecedented in many ways. We've got local government reform, we have fundamental changes in terms of how we are being funded by central government. We've been waiting for the last 15 years for these changes, but also an extraordinary amount of information from central government, from technical experts and all sorts of people who proclaim that they know how the settlement is going to impact us. But there's a lot of information. I was part of 4 webinars and numerous statements and information from central government, which was at times contradictory, and changing at every step of the way. So basically, I made the decision early on to stick with early assumptions and estimates as we had predicted from the outset. It was truly a group effort. There was a lot of people involved, and that was my plea when I first started this. And having spoken to SLB and also David and Mark about the more people we can get involved in developing the budget, the more ownership and accountability will result as a result of doing that. And everyone has completely stepped up, and it's been pleasing to see both members working together, the administration in particular, but also officers down from the heads of service to SLB and upwards. We started early because it was going to be a complex set of information that we had to present and get everybody involved, and so the process did commence in June. So what have we done at a high level since then? We've spent a lot of time reviewing and challenging ourselves about pressures and making sure that we were all very familiar with a set of sustained pressures that were affecting our budget, and making sure that we had the bridge between the current year's pressures and future year's pressures. We identified and validated the savings, particularly for the deliverability, and spent a lot of time rag-rating the savings to make sure that once we had decided to take them, that they could be deliverable. Otherwise, we would obviously have a gap in our budget process. We did a very thorough line-by-line review of every single asset in the capital program, with a view of reducing, reprofiling or removing assets from the program. And we also spent a lot of time, back to Councillor Sunnock's previous point, about how we were going to reduce the borrowing requirement in the future. And in particular, we've done it in a way which applies 40 million of capital receipts through the asset disposal program. So we were fortunate enough to do that. And one of the things that we have done, and is detailed at length in the program, in the report, is that we haven't just pulled the capital receipts. We've done a very forensic application of capital receipts to every single line, where we would get what I'm calling the best bang for our buck in terms of where that capital receipt was going to be applied. We also made the decision, the administration made the decision that there was a call to have a strategic application of reserves in order to make investments in services for our residents. Finally, there was a thorough review of all fees and charges, and they're detailed in Annex 3 of the report, and there's many pages of the fees and charges, to ensure that we set a fair price for all of the services that we deliver. And this is what I call our multidisciplinary approach to balancing the budget. So it's multifaceted, and unlike some of our Essex neighbours, we're not throwing reserves at the problem. So we now await for the settlement. We have now been told over the last couple of days that it can't be later than the 18th. So it's been we've been told it's the 17th of December. And we have prepared as best we can. We have looked at all eventualities. So whichever way whether the axe falls or not, we're prepared for every eventuality in terms of how I, in particular, as a Section 151, present this report, and how I would balance it. Balance the budget for next year is my legal requirement. As we have said earlier on in this meeting, this is a draft, and it is underpinned by a set of assumptions. I believe that they are very robust assumptions, and that we've tested them to the best extent possible, but they are assumptions. They will no longer become assumptions once we know what our settlement looks like next year. Some of the information that you probably don't see in this draft report, I can't bring to you yet, and I need the settlement in terms of understanding more precisely how our funding will look like. So there's some information that I understand that you were expecting to see tonight, but I can't give you a funding table until we know our settlement, so that will all be part of the final budget. And particularly how we will close the gap, which is currently about £400,000. So to conclude, we are very confident in this budget. We're confident that we can can deliver the information that's contained in this report. It's a budget which is deliverable, and it leaves a strong and sustainable legacy into local government reform, whatever configuration we will be in the future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Now, this is a long report, very detailed report, pages describing the assumptions that underpin what is going into the budget. There are probably two ways we could deal with this. One is that we just have members asking questions at random, sort of scatter process. Alternatively, which I think I prefer, if you agree, that we section our questions according to the parts of the budget. So start off with questions on the MTTF, the cost pressures, the proposed savings and the fees and charges. Then we move over to questions on the reserves, if there are any. Then questions on the capital programme, and finish off with any questions on the HRA. That would sort of just keep the groups and the themes going together. I mean, if any member thinks that's a really daft idea, say so, because we can go back to just asking questions at random, but quite often one member's question leads to another, and I think there's a bit of consistency if we try and just focus on a particular area at a time. Paul?
Yes, I think one of the issues that came up in the Chair's briefing, though, was a more fundamental one, that a large part of the budget is predicted on having £40 million worth of asset sales, which will then produce substantial benefits in terms of MRP and other savings. During the Chair's meeting, there were some questions as to how that fits together. I think it might be helpful if we dealt with that first, because if we found that was unsound, then the rest of the budget becomes much more difficult to do. And there were certainly some questions about how the minimum revenue provision calculations were done that I think we should clear up now, rather than do a more individual approach, because it doesn't fit neatly into any one of the various sections that you described.
No, it's certainly a capital question, which then spreads over the revenue question. So yeah, I think we just need a process which is going to tease out what we want in the most as quickly and in a structured way as possible. So if we are agreeable, can we deal with that point first? Councillor Bourne.
I still think it might be appropriate if we took a kind of generic look at the approach, the way the document had been prepared and that kind of thing, in case you've got any comments about that, rather than going straight to the granularity of the thing.
Yes, I mean, then let's have a short session on how it was prepared, deal with the specific issue of the MRPs, which sort of cut across capital and into revenue. And Councillor Sonex, you've got a point on how we should conduct the debate.
Yes, I want to support Councillor Smith's proposal that we get to the bottom of the MRP thing. I think it's justifiable, but I think it's an important one. I've heard to my eyeballs about the budget process, but if we have to do that, then we have to do it.
Okay, colleagues, let's kick off then with Councillor Bourne's point. Observations on the generality of the 100 pages, then deal with the MRP, then take a quick whistle through the four main key subject areas within the budget. Councillor Bourne, the floor's yours.
Yes, thank you. Obviously, having only just arrived, I probably haven't suffered as much as the rest of you with the process up to now. But I was encouraged. I thought the document was very well written. It looks to me that as if it's Green Book compliant. I did struggle a little bit about the level of granularity and the scale, but then I'm used to dealing with major projects and programmes, and I just worked out that the net budget for the city would run the NHS for just over an hour. But anyway, I thought it was very good. I thought it flowed well. I thought the narrative style was appropriate. I thought it anchored things well with the revenue as well as the MTFF put side by side, dealing both with the revenue and the capital position. So to me, that all looked good. I thought the assumptions looked okay, except for the pay rise at 2%, which, no way. 2.5%. Oh, well, slightly better. And not convinced about the interest rate assumption either. But I thought the framework for the analysis was good, the objectives were there, so there's some rigour into it. I thought bringing out the known unknowns was already been mentioned, and that was good, and obviously some of them will become knowns, hopefully fairly soon, but then others will remain unknown. I thought, generally speaking, the role of the reserves appeared to come through as a prudent approach. So overall, the approach to me was prudent. I've got a few specific points I'm happy to go on to, if you like. I thought the RAG rating was good, but I don't buy all green. I'm sorry, I thought that was wildly optimistic. I think the 2.2 million for the new landlord function, I think that's probably risky, put it that way. Although I'm not advocating detailed statistical analysis, you'll be pleased to say. And I thought if I've got one criticism, it was about how risk is dealt with throughout the document. I'm not sure it was as robust as it could be. Some savings are a lot easier to deliver than others, obviously. So overall, I thought it was very good. I have got a couple of particular issues. I mean, like the external audit recommendation about management, I was very pleased to see that because there's been a trend to denounce managers and cut management positions and things like that, which I think has been very unwise because that normally results in falling efficiency and very poor systems management. So I hope that that's a question if you like. So I hope the recommendation to strengthen the management teams continues to be the policy. I've got a question about the Triple F programme. You may well have covered it elsewhere. I'm sorry if I wasn't there for that. But has anyone done any lessons learned exercise about why it didn't perform quite as well as it might have done, so that we could have more confidence that it will deliver going forward? And I was very puzzled about the Northern Gateway thing. Again, it might just be a gap in my knowledge, but we seem to be giving them some money, but I've got no idea why. Well, not them, whoever it is. So there's some issues around some of that about how that's governed. And I have to admit a prejudice against arm's length companies, so that might have influenced that. So there's a few questions around that. Overall, I thought it was very well presented, well argued, and I don't have any significant issues other than the ones I've just touched on. It looks kind of amber-green to me at the moment.
Are you challenging the use of 2.5% as an assumption and the interest rate shown in the paper?
No.
Yes, please respond.
Just, Councillor Bourne, just on the RAG rating, just to make it clear, we had RAG rating between red, amber and green. But the reason we chose green is because we knew it was deliverable and wanted to make sure that the savings that were in the programme could be delivered. We have, depending on how the settlement goes, if it goes really badly for us, we've got a set of amber savings that we can include in the gap. So we to make up for any shortfall of funding, and if it goes really badly, we've got the red ones. We're going to have to do more work to get those in a better state, and we're always working behind the scenes. But the reason why what you have in there is all green is because there was a lot of work with heads of service, with SLB and with members to determine that they are deliverable, which is that I just thought I would help with the RAG rate.
Mark, you have something to
Yeah, just to add to that, so you only see the green ones in there because at the moment that's what we're hoping for with a neutral settlement from government. And I would say, just to back up with what Anna's said, which is all absolutely helpful and correct, there is political judgment in there as well as to which ones we could accept and we felt the public could accept. The amber ones would be less acceptable, and we hope we don't have to go there, and the red ones are the ones we think politically should not be taken. But it's not just the politics, it's about what is achievable in terms of what can be brought in as income, what can be saved, and some of these do represent full-time equivalent posts being lost, which will occur with these fit for the future savings. So the FFF is fit for the future, and that is the savings we've previously done, which you alluded to. Not all were met, and these are the ones baked into this budget. And one reason I'm more confident in these is something that Anna talked about earlier as well, is the ownership and the accountability. We really hammered sort of the need to get the cost pressures out very early, to get the services to say what are your pressures, and let's be as honest as possible about them, and then let's see how we can tackle them. So this whole process, and I mentioned budget squads, saw teams of services come together with one or two other service heads coming in to give an external view to combine with that service view. So it's been a much more in-depth process. Of course, we can't guarantee we're going to have 100% of every particular saving completed in time, but we are more confident than ever because of the process we've taken and the accountability of services in this report. Therefore, those are green because of all that work, and politically we believe it satisfies our work. Thank you.
And I don't think this evening we want to go into any particular depth in exploring the Northern Gateway. This is a highly complex project or set of projects which carries significant risk. If we get it wrong, considerable profit and assistance for our finances if we get it right. And I would suggest it's probably appropriate that you should have a personal briefing from our finance team on just how it works and what the difficulties have been to date, rather than exploring it here today. And it will be a project, given your background, Richard, it will be a project of great interest to you. Your question about the FFF programme, I sympathise with you there. Accounts are described as a linear system, so if you take version A, add the FFF to get version B, you should then be able to take version B, subtract FFF and get to version A, but for some reason last year it was not possible to do that. So many of us were left wondering about the accuracy of the information on the FFF project, so we sympathise with you for there. But are you able to add a few words about the status of the FFF projects, Anna? Oh, sorry, I hope you were going to say that they have now been rolled into the general programme and they're not being treated separately, and therefore those problems are not going to arise again. But perhaps I shouldn't have said that. I should have waited for that to be.
That is correct.
Chair, do you want me just to add in, is on page 32, paragraph 5.3, it lays out the detail of the Fit for the Future programme savings, shows the 67% achievement of savings. Some of the under-delivery was due to changes in political decisions as well, particularly around street care and greening, and any future savings that are forecast as part of the budget will become part of that future Fit for the Future programme. So they're all itemised there. There's quite clear statements about how each saving has been delivered.
But it was the understanding that there will only be one stream of savings being considered this year.
Yes.
If you would explain that to us.
Yeah, no, that is correct. And as we said with the RAG ratings, if we need to go further, we will have to. But you are right. It's different to last time. It's more transformational, and they do bleed into each other, as I say, with the green. If we can't derive as much as we need from the green, we move to the amber.
Okay, let's move on then to the overarching question of MRPs. Councillor Sykes, did you want to elaborate the scope that was previously mentioned by Councillor Smith in what we're asking for here?
I have one question on the budget process and one on the MRP. The one on the budget process is that we've done a bottom-up budget squads process. In FFF, I don't think we've made any cost savings of any. The number of staff have continued. We've not really been able to see cost savings coming through the budget. Any cost savings from the corporate landlord have been scattered all over the place. We've mostly dealt with it by increasing charges, and that is also reflected in the latest lot of 6 million odd of savings that are proposed. They're coming from disposals, and they're coming from increases of charges, a small amounts coming from cost saving. But we continue with our staff numbers, as far as I can see, growing over the whole organisation, including CBH and including in the main council, and having adjusted for things like the various bits coming in and out of CCHL. So I'd say I would make the point that a bottom-up process will never save you costs, because people will absolutely understandably defend their budgets, and I would, if I was in the organisation, I would do it too. And so the challenge I put forward is, if we're going into LGR, do we want to go in with 1,000 odd staff across the organisation, or do we want to really try and get to grips with the cost, or are we going to continue plugging the gap with increased charges to residents and the disposals, which of course I support, because exactly what I proposed last year in the budget. Moving on to the MRP one, Chair, if you'd like me to do that next. I understand the calculations that have been done rather well, because they're very similar in nature to the ones I did for the budget amendments last year. So I understand what you're doing, and I think it does work. A lot of it comes from sleight of hand, because of course you don't charge MRP for the first year when you do capital expenditure, but you do charge it for the first year when you do disposals. So there's a mismatch, and as far as I can see, that's allowed, and you know, so we support it. But I guess the more important question about it is, what does it do to our budget if we don't meet that disposal programme? It's something out with our control. And even if you manage to agree a deal, it's quite within the capacity of lawyers to spend months and months and months sorting it out. And I'm sure those in the estate with estate's experience will support me. What do we do if we get to the end of the year and we haven't sold a very large chunk of assets? The programme of disposals that you're proposing in this budget is much more ambitious than the programme I proposed in the budget amendment last year.
Councillor Smith, do you wish to elaborate on the scope of the question?
Indeed, yes. I do want to get a drill down on table 8 in section 8.29 to understand how those figures are actually arrived at. Absolutely, I'm not sure I'd use the word sleight of hand. I think I'd use applying accountancy rules in a cost-effective manner as to what we're trying to do. But just looking at the figures for the capital receipt, first year we make capital receipts of 5 million and it saves us £1 million. That's 20%. That's pretty good. But then the next year we do £25 million worth of capital receipts, and that only saves us £632,000. And then the final year we make 10.75 capital receipts, and in the first year of that saves us £853,000. Just looking at those figures, they look very strange. So I think I'd like to understand that. And the second point, again following on from Councillor Sunnock's point, the asset disposal, and I fear this is something we would have to do in closed session, that I would like to understand exactly what assets we are likely to be selling and what are the projected prices, so that we can at least kick the tyres and say, yes, that looks a reasonable figure, or actually the fact that you think you're selling the town hall for £39 million, you know, to a cash buyer is not quite right. And I think in the scrutiny role, that would be something that we would need to look at. But I appreciate that's not something we could do in open session, because if I was to tell Councillor Sykes I'm prepared to sell this property at £5 million, his offer of £8 million that he was going to make would immediately be withdrawn. And that's not good business sense. So I think those are the two aspects.
Yeah, just to clarify, we're talking about Table 8, which is on page 53, item 8.29 in the paper. I mean, given the length of this report, it would be helpful, I think, if members identify just where in the document they're pointing to, so that we can all find Table 8 in milliseconds rather than having to thumb through 100 pages to get there. Now, we don't have a list of the proposed disposals. I'm not sure whether such a list is immediately available, and even if it was, it's not not in the pack this evening. So, can you help us on that one, Mark?
Yes, Chair, thank you. We have the first of a number of disposals coming in January to you, where we'll be able to go into full detail then, and that will be a number of examples we can show to you. We'd have to go into closed session, I would say, to talk about some of the examples, if I was to give you a few, and bring Patricia to the table for those. But as I say, we've got there's 2 meetings in the new year where we'll have a number of disposals coming forward where we can talk in greater detail. I would also say that the Members Estate Group has seen most of these as well, has seen examples of what's coming forward. Those will be up at Northern Gateway, and those will be other examples where we have it in and around the town that we've put forward and we've had cross-party support for so far. So, as I say, I think there's a clear trajectory of ability to get the disposals in, some even within this year and most within 26-27. I don't know, Patricia, if you want to add any more at this point, but that's my steer to you, Chair, that we can have some conversation in private this evening, but also you have the detail, and we'll have the full detail in the new year in the next 2 scrutiny sessions.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, the disposals paper will detail out the list of disposals that will be coming in January, but it will need to be closed session because of the commercial sensitivity of what you're putting to market, the values associated and the addresses and the approach, because some of them will be a different approach for some than others. So the information is there, the analysis has been done, so there's an awful lot of detail to back up what we're talking about, and we've actually been rather prudent in terms of what we're putting forward, but we can go through that in more detail in a closed session.
I think, panel, we need to differentiate this evening between what we need to know to express a view on the direction of the budget so far, and what we would like to know about things which will affect budgets in the future. And I'm not convinced that we need to see this table or discuss these issues this evening to be able to express an opinion to Cabinet whether we think the assumptions and the budget statement at the moment are sound. But when it comes to our work item, the other remaining item on the agenda, it would be fair, I think, at that stage to take a view whether we as a panel wish to look at the entire programme or whether we just want to look at disposals C1, C2 and R3 as and when they come along. And I think we as a panel, we need to take a view on how we're going to look further at this particular highly important activity which is supporting the budget. But for this evening, I don't think the information is available. It would take too long. And even if we get a glimpse, a flavour of what is going on by going into private session, I don't think it will materially help us express a view on whether we're happy with the direction of the budget so far. But if your view is contrary to that summary, then I'm in your hands, colleague. Anna.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So Patricia's comment was one. So in order for anything to go into the budget, we challenge ourselves, and as the Section 151, I challenge it quite strongly in terms of I understand members' concern, I suppose, that it is predicated on £40 million of capital receipts, reducing our MRP, and I understand that completely. It is a significant amount. However, after having many conversations and sessions with the estates team, who are the experts, it's not finance, so we can only challenge and they provide us with the information. I'm comfortable that even if there were some delays in some areas, that we could accelerate in other areas in terms of providing some additional capital receipts. As Patricia said, her estimate of the 40 million is a prudent estimate, and I know that there is much more there should we require it in order to hit our target, because there's been delays in cash flow.
I'm very happy to accept that statement, coupling it with the fact that we will want to look at this particular area in detail in the new year. Now, if there are any sort of violent dissensions on that, we can discuss the matter further. Councillor Sullivan.
I support that, and the sooner you can give us that detailed MRP schedule, the better. I think that'll, you know, that the numbers speak louder than words on all this. We've got loads of words, but the numbers are much more useful.
So last year we saw a copy of the MRP schedule against projects. I hope it will be coming along this year because it was useful. The second point, which we have yet to address, is that raised by Councillor Smith, that like him, I had difficulty understanding where the numbers came from. Now, is this a sort of matter which can be explained in 30 seconds to us, or is this a matter where there needs to be a briefing note to the committee to explain how it is done? I'm sensing the latter.
Correct, Chair. There is a complicated spreadsheet that sits below this in terms of how the numbers are derived. It's very detailed. It's asset by asset. We have over 100 schemes in the capital programme, and the receipts, it's been done on a forensic basis based on the useful life of the assets. So rather, we couldn't sit here and go through all of that level of detail. It would take up a long time, and actually it would be counterproductive to the time that we have available. Suffice to say that there is a detailed spreadsheet that sits below this. It's not something that I would include in the report because it is a lot of detail and it doesn't help the understandability of it, but happy that we can circulate that to the committee tomorrow, and you can see that level of detail, and should members require a separate briefing on how that's constructed, we are happy to make that happen as well.
Does that satisfy your requirement, Councillor Smith? Because I'm absolutely with you. I was not able to understand how the assumptions and how we actually got to the results here, although I'm happy to accept the results as being valid because the work has been done.
I'm disappointed that we can't at least have a summary as to why it was done when this was raised at the group chair's briefing, that this was a subject that we said we couldn't quite understand how these figures worked out. So if we could have some, at least, explanation as to the principles behind it. I don't need to know the exact figures, but just to say why it appears that in the first year we're doing really well, and in the third year we're doing very well, but in the second year it's a disaster.
So if we can have a note in the minutes that we expect. When?
I must admit, in 25 years of working in local government finance, I've never seen members so interested in MRP. So, as a finance nerd, I love it that you're interested in the details. So, as Anna's already talked to, there's over 100 different schemes that MRP's applied to at the moment. And what we've done, and as Councillor Sillings explained earlier on, is we're governed by the CITFA code. The CITFA code sets out how we pay down our MRP. And if you look at how MRP is calculated, there's three different things. So when did we incur the expenditure? What kind of asset was it? And that denotes on how we pay it down over and what period we pay it down. And also the amount of the scheme when it was first taken. And what you've got, if you imagine 100 different schemes over the years, you're going to have ones which are high value, but actually they're written down over a longer period. Ones which are lower value, written over a shorter period. And what we've done is behind it, we've got a accounting specialist, a CITFA qualified accountant, who's gone through it and has looked at how can we apply that receipt to the MRP that will give us our biggest saving first. So it's essentially paying down the biggest amount of debt first. If you take those three things, you haven't got a linear saving. It goes up and down. And what you've also got going on is you're spending money in your capital programme. So as that comes online, we're using that debt, those receipts, to pay down some of that debt as well, which is why you might get a curve that looks like this. So we are happy to do a session outside of this, but I would take up the next 2 hours probably going through the level of detail you would need in order to go through it. So we're happy to have a challenge session outside of this. And also the other thing we haven't really talked about is the interest saving. So obviously if you've got less debt that you're taking, then there is an interest saving. So if you take table 8 and then you take that off of item 1 on the proposed savings, the difference between that is the interest saving that you're making as a result of those MRP savings. But as I say, it's probably not appropriate for us to spend a whole session going through just the MRP calculation, but if any members want to come along and spend an hour or so with us going through it, we're more than happy to do that.
I think that's a very useful offer, but I don't hear any dissension that the committee doesn't accept that the MRP charges after capital receipt line is what should be included in the budget. I accept that this is highly technical work with specialists employed to do it, but at the same time, as a scrutiny panel, one of our functions is to sort of challenge the assumptions, the work processes and so on, some of which, as you've correctly said, is very complex. But this is an area where clearly several members would like just a little more reassurance on how it's done, rather than just giving the overall results. So can we accept your very kind offer, whether it's a briefing note or a session for members? I sort of leave to your discretion according to the complexity of what it is you wish to present to us. But with that undertaking, is table 8 in its present form acceptable as part of the budget? Councillor Bourne.
I think that makes a great deal of sense, but I think the broader point I tried to make was kind of as a preliminary, was that if you go down the line by line, either of the savings or anything else, some are intrinsically far more risky than others. And for some of them that are intrinsically likely to be risky, it might merit a paragraph or something in the report, just to give, I'm not going to pretend to know how much information, but just to say every single line has got equal risk, I think is not a sensible argument.
Shall we wait until the briefing note or the briefing and then pitch into these areas until we're satisfied or want to go home for dinner? So, Paul.
So I just want to check. I think I've got the thing that in the year 2, when we've got the 25 million capital receipts coming in, what we're saying is that we're also looking to be borrowing some money, and so we'll be using some of those capital receipts to effectively pay for the borrowing rather than repaying existing debt, which is why the figure turns out to be lower. Have I basically got the concept right?
Sort of, yeah. I say, let's have the session on it.
Thank you. That's helpful. It is difficult, though, that we are looking at some very interesting figures here that don't make logical sense. I think with the explanation we've got, we can see where they're coming from, but it would have been helpful, given that it was raised at the Chair's briefing, for us to have had at least a better explanation as to why the figures appear to be so different.
We live in an imperfect world, and a lot of business is going on at the moment, and I think we've got the best outcome that we can possibly get here, an offer of explanations which we take up with alacrity. But in the meantime, I think we just have to accept on an issue like this that a lot of officers' work, as we've heard, a lot of financial specialist work, people who know all about the CITFA rules have done this, and therefore it's prudent to accept that Table 8 is a valid contribution to the ongoing budget until such time as it's proven to the contrary. Although there's a risk in that, Paul, I'm sure. Are there any more questions on the generality of the budget before we start looking at some of the detail? If not, it is past the hour we normally break for 10 minutes. It's after 9:30. So with your agreement, colleagues, can we adjourn for 10 minutes, then come back and start addressing any of the issues of detail in the various tables which have been presented to us. Okay, we adjourn. Are we all sitting comfortably? Then we will resume. Just recap where we've got to. We've looked at the generality and raised some issues. And there's the question over the MRP Table 8, but there are no other significant overarching issues being raised. So that now gives us the opportunity to raise any more minor but still important issues which we may have on the various parts of the budget. And let's look at the Table 4 and the underlying tables for Table 4, the Annex 1 cost pressures, Annex 2 proposed savings, and Annex 3 fees and charges. So, members, are there any issues which you wish to raise on the sort of first level of detail under what we've been looking at? Councillor Rowe has gone home. He should have. I don't think he should have turned up really at all, but he has gone home. He's not feeling too well. Councillor Sunnox.
Yes, I'd like to suggest that we concentrate on what we should look at tables 3 and 4, and we should understand what they're trying to say, and then we should really turn our attention to Annexes 1 and 2, which are the details, is where there's obviously been a lot of work on what I call the journals, on the deltas, on the changes from last year, but the overview given by tables 3 and 4, I think is at best confusing and at worst misleading. And I just wanted to say, if I may, Chair, why. Table 3 shows us using reserves at the rate of 11 million this year. I'm trying to find the right table. At the rate of 11 million this year, and then not very much downhill movement from there on in.
Can you guide us to the page number?
Yeah. So it's page 24 of the budget.
Thank you.
And table 3 is at the top of the page, and the figure I'm looking at is 11.3. So it's saying that our total reserves were 28.9 million at the beginning of the year, and that we're expecting to use 11.3 million this year. And the next year, not very much, and the year after, not very much. Those look like bridgeable savings. But 11.3 million is a huge decline in reserves. And we know from the monitoring report that we're expecting a 6.8 million decline in reserves, of which 4.4 was going to be put through through various earmarked reserves, and the balance 2.4 was going to come from the general fund. And they're working on where to put the rest of the 2.4, but we're expecting to be going downhill by 6.8 million. That was the amount that we're expecting our expenditure this year to exceed our income. Okay, I think it's really helpful to think of cash. So it's a big surprise to see that we're expecting 11.3 million downhill there. Then if you go to the next table, table 4, you see there, the conclusion of the table is that it goes through various things. It starts off with last year's MTFF figures across the page, and it concludes at the bottom of the page that we'll have, at the end of the 5-year period, we'll have 3.1 million in general reserves. And I utterly contest that. I think the first line's got a big error in it, because it's taking the delta, it's taking the increase in deficit in each year from the MTFF. This is just arithmetic. I see the section 151 shaking her head. It's just arithmetic. You're taking the wrong figures there, and then we're taking delta figures, increase figures on the top line, and then we're taking cumulative figures down below, and I can't understand them. I hope someone will explain them, but I suspect that the best thing to do with this table is just say, leave it aside and concentrate on the annexes.
May I? So table 4 is, so just to explain table 4. So table 4 is taking an incremental view, not a cumulative view. This is all perfectly accurate and permissible. the finance world always struggles with how to best show the changes year on year, whether you take a cumulative effect or an in-year incremental view. The first line of Table 4 are the figures that were produced in the full council reports that went in February 25 with minor adjustments for prudency against some funding assumptions, particularly around new burdens grant and around the recovery grant. So having looked at those figures, we made a decision that actually we wanted to be slightly more prudent. So they've been adjusted for those, and then we adjusted for known increases at the time that we started the process of setting the draft budget, which is increases in extended producer requirements and also the pay increase over and above the 2%, which was originally allocated when the budget went to full council last year. There was a 2% assumption on pay. We did make the decision that 2% was too low, so we added another 0.5% to bring it up to 2.5%. Then, as we set out there, then there's the pressures and the savings which are identified in the annexes, which leaves us a gap in first year of £400,000 after the application of the green savings. That £400,000 is then assumed to be taken from reserves because that is the only place left to take it in the absence of any additional funding from central government. So of course this assumption is predicated on the fact that we still don't know what our settlement looks like. Then every year after that we show the reduction in reserves because of the gap in the line that says the in-year budget gap. We cannot have a gap. We need to set a balanced budget. So the assumption is that that is going to come from reserves. Of course, we don't know what the future years look like, and this table is predicated on the pressures that are set out as identified in this table, that the savings are all taken as identified in this table, and that there are no other changes than what is set here. But what that bottom line does show you is that the budget gap is the same line as what is taken in in-year reserves. So it shows a reduction in reserves for the gap in the line that says budget gap. So it is taken an incremental view, which is perfectly permissible to do.
Can you explain exactly which lines are incremental and which lines are cumulative? And what I draw, I can see the first line, the 3.3, 2.6, 1.4. I can see that's incremental.
That's incremental.
Yeah.
Yes.
The EPR increase, is that incremental or cumulative?
Incremental.
That's incremental, and presumably the pay award's incremental.
Yes.
So you're saying you've
It's
got an extra cost of 0.4 million in the first year, and an extra 0.6, so a total of 1 million saving, extra cost in the second year. So that's incremental. Then you come down to the pressures. So you're saying you've got 3 million and an extra 4.1 million in the next year. So you're already saying the pressures are 7.1 million in the next year. Is that right? Or is that now a cumulative figure? This is my point. I think that those pressures and savings are done on a cumulative basis, and then you're adding them to the incremental basis, and you're getting, I don't know what, you're adding apples and pears and getting sausages or something.
Is it incremental? Do you want to answer? Do you want to answer?
Well, all I'm going to do is repeat what you've just said.
Every line of this is on an incremental basis.
So from the 3.3 down to the 0.4, that's on an incremental basis. That's
yes.
the in-year our surplus or deficit. Yeah.
Okay.
And then the table below, which starts general fund reserve balance. That's the bit where we're trying to show, on a cumulative basis, the impact on the general fund reserve. So it's all incremental in the top part of it. And again, quite happy to go through that in another session, but there's only so many ways we can sort of say it.
That means that if you take the savings line, the savings you're going to make in the first year of 5.8, the next year 6.8 plus 5.8, whatever that is, 12.6 or something, And the next year, it's going to be 18 odd million, and the next year after, it's going to be 24 million. I just don't think that's right. You know, that's the whole budget. You're not going to make that much in savings. I think those are cumulative figures you've put there. And if you look through to Annex 2, they're definitely cumulative figures. So I think you're definitely adding cumulative figures to incremental figures and getting a hodgepodge that we should just politely ignore.
Well, I don't think we need to ignore it, because certainly the first few lines, which are done on an in-year basis, as far as I can see, are quite correct. And the only problem I have with that table is that if one follows the CIPFA advice and does it on an in-year basis, then it is necessary to charge to reserves the previous in-year figure. And that has not been done. So the only part of that table I disagree with is the use of reserves, because in the first year it makes no difference, because the in-year and the structural deficit are the same by definition. It's only in subsequent years that there is a divergence between in-year and structural, because if you're doing in-year accounting, you then have to write off the debt for that year effectively to reserves, so that you start with, you rebase your budget. Whereas if it's structural, you're not rebasing your budget on an annual basis. So the table is okay, in my view, until you get to the implication on reserves, where the necessary write-off has not been carried out.
No, that's not correct. The fact is that by accepting that top line and the incremental changes, you are accepting the fact that everything that happens below that get us to the point where we have a gap or a surplus, and every year apart from the middle year we have a gap, which shows the reduction in reserves, because that gap, we cannot set an imbalanced budget, so that gap has to be taken to reserves, all else being equal, or we reduce our pressures or we increase our savings. So that's why the reserves figure reduces over the period, because we have to take that gap somewhere and we've taken it to reserves.
I think this will have to be taken offline as well, because there are sort of significant differences, I think, in how this table is produced. But I'm not sure that it undermines the budget in any way, because it undermines the reserve statement, but the impact on future budgets expressed in in-year terms is correct. I have no dispute with that at all.
Can I have one last bite of the cherry? I don't know if this explains it better. So usually within the full budget report, what you'll see is the MTFS. And what you've almost got is like an I&E account, if you apply that to a private organisation. And it will show income, expenditure, and then there'll be an in-year profit or loss. What we've done here with this table is it's doing exactly that. So for the accounts for 26-27, we thought we'd start off with a £3.3 million deficit. In that year, we know we're going to get an extra £500,000. We know that we'll have a £400,000 extra in our payroll, and we've got pressures of 3 million, and then savings to offset that of 5.8. That's 1 year. So in that year, we're going to make a £400 loss. In the next year, we thought that we were going to have a £2.6 million deficit, and then followed the same logic through. So in 27, 28, if we were to do a set of accounts on its own, like an I&E account, we're going to balance. Okay, and that's how it works. And then the bottom table essentially says, because we've got to have a balanced budget and we've got to use some of our general fund reserve, we've got a cumulative balance of brought forward of 4.4 million of general fund reserves. We're going to have to use 400,000 of those, which leaves us with 4 million. Next year, we don't need to take anything out of the reserves. They remain at 4 million. The following year, we've lost another 200,000, so we have to take 200,000 out of the reserve. So the cumulative position is 3.7. Excuse the rounding in the table. And then by the time you get to the end of there, if you take all of those losses that we're making in those MTFS periods, our reserves at 3.1 million if we don't put any back into them. And hopefully that makes sense. And that's exactly the same table as in every single budget report this council's ever seen. It's just, we're just showing it in a summarised version. It's exactly the same format.
I think we just have to accept the table as it is for the time being. We can't debate this any further. There's a difference of opinion as to whether it's correct. I think we just have to accept it on the basis that that it's been presented and explained, and we need to wait until we see the full description of the budget later on. And
I think this is sort of completely fundamental, and that we need to get our thinking back to cash, and all this interweaving of reserves is getting too complicated. We have money that we spend, we have money that we receive, and there's a difference. And the difference has to go to reserve. I understand all that. But we've got ourselves, this table, the implication of this table is, well, either we should be taking the previous year's deficit to reserves, as the chair says, or we should be looking at those savings, that savings line. And I do it again. Everything is meant to be incremental there, but the savings line is clearly cumulative. It's just completely cumulative. Are we trying to say that the savings line is an incremental line, that we should add that line together to show the total savings we're going to make over the 4 years, or are we saying that's the in-year figure? Just so we have clarity on that. I think we've got a fundamental different understanding of what a deficit is and what a surplus is.
Mark.
Chair, I think Wayne's explanation is not only correct, it was helpful. I think the one unhelpful thing there is the word savings, because as we see savings, that means taking something out completely. What that will include, and Wayne will tell me if I'm completely wrong here, is that will include inflationary increases in fees and charges, that will include council tax increases, that will include income coming into the council, as well as the cost reductions that we'll be making. So perhaps the word savings could be elaborated on in terms of we need to meet that figure. And we can do that like we are doing with the disposals programme in reducing financing costs. We can increase income, we'll have more council tax coming in, etc. It's not just the word saving. I think perhaps the word saving thinks we're going to have to make that much amount of cuts. We've got, for example, the increase in the extended producer pays coming in, so we will see movements that aren't just savings in the traditional sense of the word.
That's true. That's correct. Yes, that's correct.
Chair, is it the moment now to move on to Schedule 2? Because then I think we'll be able to see whether they are cumulative or incremental. At the moment, what we've been told is they're incremental, which means that the total should be, in the 4th year, should be 20-something million, adding all those together.
There is a difference of opinion here amongst experts. What is clear to me is that we're looking primarily at the budget for 2026-27, and because of the quirk of the arithmetic, it matters not whether you use the in-year or the structural figures. For the first column in your table, you'll get the same result. And the argument about how it's done will impinge or impact on subsequent years, but not on the year one. And on that basis, I mean, if we're just looking at the narrow issue of 26-27, this accountancy debate doesn't really matter at all, because it's the same for both. It's only when one looks at the subsequent years that one gets a difference if it's in year or structural. So, I mean, can we accept that point unless anyone's going to argue that it isn't the same?
I deeply disagree. I think we'll have to move on, but I deeply disagree. I think showing an MTF, you have to, by law, show MTFF, and to have one that is as misleading as this is really bad. and that we should politely ignore it and hope that it comes back in January in a better format after we've got the government settlement. Because as it stands at the moment, it makes, to me, no sense and is best forgotten.
Leader.
Listening to this, I had to sort of just give some counsel to colleagues. First of all, with respect, we shouldn't be using repeatedly words like misleading. We shouldn't be damning work to which we've got a disagreement, but we haven't got to the bottom of an understanding. The latter point is fair, and here's the thing of substance for me, and I say it to everybody. Our test, when we produce documents we hope of quality, and in my view in the round this is that it should be readable and understandable. That's a really big challenge, but it should be something that any member could understand. And a dedicated reader from outside beyond this place might have a prospect of doing so. So I think we should take away the challenge that this conversation has revealed, which is that the numbers alone in the form that they're in are not quite doing it for at least some members. And if that's true here, that'd be true for others elsewhere. So I think what we should do, Mark, if I can say this, is apply the plain English test. How close to that is it possible to get to ensure we don't have the kind of repeat of this in the new year? Thanks.
So if we can, we note that there is a disagreement there, and I think we should also note that it doesn't actually affect the figures for 2026-27. It only affects the reserves position for future years, which is a matter that needs sorting. But having just noted that, can we move on to the next point?
Are we moving on to schedules 1 and 2 now?
Yes, please.
Okay, if we go to Schedule Annex 2, we've got a whole load of savings here, 3 million from the corporate landlord model, and I think we've done to death the first and the biggest line, the 2.184 million, and we know that's dependent on the disposal programme, and we've been reassured that there's a prospect of getting there, if not with the ones we're currently planning to sell, with some others. The queries I have about the other one is the pause of the contribution to corporate landlord repairs reserve. I'm not sure that that was ever in the budget last year. So I'm not sure that we're not taking out something that was never in there. That would be a query on that. And the insourcing of maintenance service, the 230,000, would also get a question mark. How do we save 230,000? I'm sure we can save a little bit, but can we really do maintenance service that much more efficiently in-house to save 230,000? Shall I leave it there for the moment, Chair? So we can clear those little ones.
Is there an immediate answer for that one?
Patricia is here for the corporate landlord answer, which is yes, that was in the budget, but I'll go to her. The insourcing maintenance service, I'm not sure if we have a head of service who would... Oh, yeah, it is you as well, Patricia. Okay. Over to you.
Thank you. So we did a very, very detailed analysis of all of the contracts that we have in place, what we're spending and what we're spending it on. We've also looked at capacity with the in-house technical team, who are currently based in Leisure World, but we have some trades in there that actually we could be using to do some of the work that we're outsourcing, well not outsourcing, but contracting out, bearing in mind the premium that we'll be paying on that. So I'm very comfortable with that 200,000 saving coming in by the guys that we've got actually doing that work. It's not specialist work, it's not air handling units, that kind of thing, but it is work that we could be doing in-house. So we have actually done that very detailed analysis, and we've got all of that background behind us. The first question was the 395.
Because I know you've been saying that we need to spend an awful lot more, and we need to put aside reserves to for the long-term maintenance of our assets,
Yes.
because we've fallen behind.
Yes.
And I remember getting into trouble for saying you were a very expensive person.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was that 395 was in there the previous year. You're correct. But what we're doing is we are creating more appropriate projects, and we're using the capital funding. We've got £1 million of capital funding in the asset management piece, so we're shifting some of the work into that space and doing things a little bit more thoroughly, shall we say. So I'm quite comfortable with that offering up of the 395.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll hand over to other people to ask the other questions. I think I've been talking too much.
If I can ask some mundane questions on Annex 1, page 59, there are 3 entries which says increasing staffing costs as a result of regrading, and it occurs in 3 departments. Is it possible just to have a word on why we are regrading and regrading upwards? It seems to be a trend. Is there an easy answer to that?
Yeah, so it's an easy explanation. Because of our grading system, we have overlapping grades, and we've had that for many years, which meant that we've got staff on much more skilled work, for example, drivers, on the same salaries as loaders. So for drivers, there was representation made by Unison that actually that was unacceptable, and there was some industrial relations issues with that. So we uplifted the drivers above the loaders, so they had a higher pay because they're more skilled. At that point, obviously there was an equal pay issue, so we had staff on the same grades as drivers that were then paid at the lower salary. So it was an equal pay issue. And bear in mind, you read about things like Birmingham City Council, we had to make that adjustment.
So the rationale for this increase will have been well documented and understood in terms of the skills of the people regarding their colleagues who required less skills.
Yes.
In all cases.
Yes, absolutely. And there was a discussion. There's a portfolio holder decision. It was published. It's all out there, and it was a way really to mitigate any claims against the council, which would have been considerable.
Thank you. Colleagues, any further questions on annexes 1 and 2 and the fees and charges? The fees and charges, there were some significant increases, and one wonders whether the market will actually accept some of those increases, but I guess we just have to try it and see whether the cash rolls in. So no questions on Annex 1, 2 and 3. The reserves table on page 46 is probably impacted by the discussions we were having earlier on. If I can find page 146.
Yes, you've got the total proposed savings line I draw people's attention to, which leads directly back to the reserves table and is clearly on a cumulative basis, I think, here. We're not suggesting that we're saving 6.8 million extra in 27-28 over what we've saved in 26-27. The bulk of the savings are in the first year.
I think one of the concerns was that the table 3 on page 46 shows in-year appropriations this year of 11.3 million, but the dialogue only talks about 6.8 million. Is there a reason for a significant gap between the Q2 prediction for this year and the expected total use of reserves for this year? And more importantly, what impact is that likely to have on the reserves position for next year, the year we're considering in principle?
So the 11.3 million of use of reserves, so 10.2 million of it is in 25-26, 753,000 in 26-27, and 398,000 in 27-28. The 10.2 million is different. So in the month two, in the quarter two report that I was referring to in the budget report, we're anticipating a £2.4 million overspend. It is reliant, in order to get to the overspend, in order to get the overspend down to 2.4 million, we're anticipating a 4.4 million drawdown on reserves. That's not the entirety of the drawdown. That is what has been drawn down to date. For example, we only anticipate what's going to happen at the end of the year once we know what the overspend looks like. The overspend is moving all the time, and it's only at year end that we look at what is left in order to balance the budget and take that to reserves. At the moment, we are anticipating in the 10.2 million that we are going to have to draw down the whole 2.4 million for reserves, and there are other reserves that we haven't drawn down yet but are anticipating as an earmark against the 10.2 million reserves figure in 25-26. So there will be a discrepancy between what's currently been assumed at month 2 versus what we have planned to use from reserves for 25-26. That will become apparent as we move towards outturn and the whole year is assessed in terms of where we are with the overspend against the reserves position and have to draw down accordingly.
So I still don't quite follow why we don't make the same assumptions in the quarter two report that are made in the preparation of the table 3. Surely that they're the same assumptions about what's going to happen during the course of the year and the amount of reserves that will then be available for the 26-27.
Because when we produce the report in year, there is, I suppose, the inference that any balance, because we have to set a balanced budget because it's a legal requirement, that if we were to end the year with a 2.4 million overspend, we have nowhere else to go but to take that from general fund reserves, and we have sufficient reserves to draw down against those reserves. In year, what the process is that we look for mitigations, we look for ways of reducing the overspend. We don't assume that it's going to come from, it is an assumption, but it's not made explicit in the reports that it will be a drawdown from reserves. We do earmark the reserves to make sure that we have more than sufficient. It's prudent to earmark your reserves to show that you potentially are going to take the full overspend at year end, but we don't explicitly say that in the report. It's the way we do things, but we have taken a prudent approach to assume that should we end the year with a significant overspend, we've got enough reserves to be able to allocate against it.
So the assumption is that we could possibly have, we're anticipating using 4.4 million, but we may have to go up to as high as 10 million. Correct. Because of the unpredictable nature of the second half year.
It depends on what happens. What we're saying is, should we have to take the full overspend to reserves, we have sufficient reserves to allow for that, and we know that we over the MTFF that we can draw down 11.3 million and still have enough reserves over the MTFF in order to live within our 10 to 15% requirement, as I set out in the report.
Presumably there will be a more detailed report then on the use of reserves.
Correct, and we will update this as part of the final budget, because once we get the settlement we will know more specifically, but when I do the outturn report we will have a comprehensive movement of reserves to show where the reserves have moved, because if there is an overspend we will have nowhere else to go but to take it from reserves. So we have taken a prudent approach in what we've assumed as part of this budget setting.
Councillor Sunix.
Yes, what I'm hearing is that the 6.8 million that we had in the quarter two monitoring report is what we've taken to date, and there's another 4 odd million that we think we're going to do. My question is this: that 11.3 million is credits and debits. That's a debit to reserve. We must be spending 11.3 million more than we received this year, and we're assuming it'll turn around. Well, arithmetically, we sort of must, unless you're doing what I think you might be doing, which is having a big bath. So what you do, a big bath, is when you take all the provisions, you throw everything into but the kitchen sink into the bath. And I'm getting my metaphors muddled now, and you show a really bad year, but then you've cleared out the books, and you can then show balanced budgets going forward. Is this a big bath?
No. So what this is saying, and this is standard everywhere that I've worked, the surety around the use of reserves gets less as we move into the MTFF. We are surer of 26, 20, 25, 26 drawdown. We're less sure of 26, 27, and we are even less sure of 27, 28 because we're on a sliding scale. The 11.3 million we are showing is over the course of the next 3 years of the MTFF. So we are surer. That's why it's such a huge amount in 25, 26, because we are more clearer about what our savings position will be like and what our spend position is going to be like. So it's just the normal way in which you do things. You have less certainty as you move through the MTFF. That's why it's called a forecast.
We put 3 years' worth of overspends into the first year. That's what I call a big bath.
It's not overspends. It's not overspends. A lot of this is planned use of reserves. They're planned against certain things, like, for example, the CNG reserve. We know we're going to use a certain amount of the CNG reserve over the period of the next 35 years. So we plan that in. They're not just overspends. This is a managed position. This is not just throwing the kitchen sink at everything.
Can you kind of...
So a really good example is in our earmarked reserves, which might be part of that 11.3, we've got £1 million, say, to do the local plan. So that's not a knee-jerk thing. We've deliberately set money aside to spend £1 million. When you look at the month 8 monitoring, at the moment, we're saying probably we might only spend 600,000 of that. The difference is in the table in this report, it's saying we're going to spend the whole £1 million. So it's a question of phasing, essentially. So you were comparing kind of apples with oranges. But what we're trying to show in table 3 is there is a call on those reserves, but it hasn't yet been incurred and hasn't been drawn down. But that doesn't mean we are massively overspending. It's a planned use of reserves that every organisation does, because you have peaks and troughs and what you need to meet, and that might be maintenance. So maintenance, for example, is 3.6 million, say, in reserves. We might say, well, we think we might draw down, 2 million of that this year. We might not have actually incurred that just yet, and that's one of the issues.
And that's a good point. So the one thing that it's my job to protect the reserves. So what I would do is take an over cautious and very prudent approach. So Wayne is right. If we're not clear about the actual profile of the spend against a particular reserve, we will take an extra cautious approach, and we will say that we need more against that reserve than we actually do need, and we may not know from 1 month to another, from 1 year to another, exactly how much we're going to need. So some of it's planned, some of it's unplanned, but when the profile of how it's going to plan out is rarely known to the degree that maybe you would like. But I would rather, if I don't know what the profile looks like, I'd rather say I'm going to spend £1 million in 25, 26, because these reserves can be carried forward. They are not time limited, and they're not limited within the year. Any balance is rolled forward to future years.
I think the point of misunderstanding is that they're shown as an in-year appropriation, where it's just been explained that they're not an in-year appropriation. They're an appropriation which starts in a particular year and may, if necessity arises, be transferred to future years. So I think the difficulty I was having in understanding is that I was thinking that those were destined to be appropriated in the stated year, as opposed to start appropriating them in that year and go on. I'm not quite sure how you show that in a simple table.
You can only do that once you know the profile more specifically. This is like earmarking against a particular reserve, and it may happen, it may not happen. If it doesn't happen, it becomes rolled forward, so you have increasing balances in future years against which you can draw down.
So the 11.3 million is shown in the current year, but because of the nature of the programmes that it's servicing, it may well be drawn down in future years, and that is the point of misunderstanding we have here. Now, with that clarification, are we happy with the table?
I think we need to see the detail badly of this to understand what's going on. These are such big figures.
Yep, and the detail will come in the full budget statement later on. We'll have a full description of how reserves are to be used.
I can give you an example. The establishment of a community fund, I have no detail that sits below that. It's establishment of a community fund, and that's £1 million, for example. So some of these do not lend themselves to be extrapolated any further.
To answer your question, Chair, yes, you'll get a detailed breakdown tomorrow.
Okay.
Of the £1 million, because we don't have the detail that sits behind the community asset fund.
Colleagues, we've spent a lot of time on a couple of technical points. Are there any other questions on Annex 1, 2 and 3? Or are we happy that we say we're... Councillor Moffat.
Just a quick one. I don't know if it helps, but I think I do agree with Councillor Sunnock's to a point. I just wonder if we take your earlier suggestion and focus on the 26-27 figures for tonight.
Yes, that is the main point. But as was said, the MTFF is a 3 or 5 year programme, and that is what we're technically being asked to comment on. Although, to me, the focus is just on what's going to happen to the budget next year, because that is where we have the greatest certainty. So if there are no questions on annexes, the capital programme, tables 5, 6 and 8, and Annex 4, the list of capital schemes. Colleagues, anyone wish to speak on these? Or are we all happy? Councillor Sunnock?
Yes, there's still, we've gone through them and we've dropped out the things, I'm pleased to say, that we recommended that we dropped out last year, such as the big amount, I think, to the improvements to Junction 28 and some of the Mill Road stuff. So that's good, but we're still increasing our debt absolutely massively, and it's not sustainable. And look, I believe it's not sustainable at all in the HRA. It may be sustainable in the general fund, but until we really have some clarity on the reserves, I question it. I question whether we're spending more capital expenditure than our neighbours spend, who will shortly be partnered with an LGR, and that's the moment at which it'll become very clear whether our capital budget is sustainable or not. They'll be looking over it, and we'll be showing this huge increase in debt, and they'll presumably be scratching their heads and saying, what's going on?
May I, Chair? So what you will see, Councillor Sunnock, as part of the final budget is the capital strategy and the treasury management strategy. Those two strategies are statutory strategies that go as part of the final budget. The treasury management strategy will show exactly how we're planning to fund that borrowing, and it also shows operational limits which are required under the SIPFA code. So the operational boundary limits will show the affordability or not of such debt, and that will come forward in those strategies, and that's where you will see the sustainability of that debt.
And that will show the totality of our borrowings, so that councillors will know precisely what it is we're borrowing and how much we've got to pay back, regardless of whether it's housing or general fund.
There is to be another round of the HRA business plan within 6 months. We were promised that. And I'm very much hoping that quietly, when I'm not looking, some of what I've said about the HRA and the accounting will be considered in that. Will we have that before we get to the February budget process?
Part of the February budget process, so that budget that is being updated as a result, as part of that 6 monthly review, that is all going to come as part of the final budget.
Well, can we make sure we have the prudential indicators expressed after all costs, including those that get moved into reserves, not just it's the major repairs costs. That's the big thing that is never, ever, ever accounted for in our HRA accounting. I've raised it so many times now that what's going on, Wayne, is you're looking quizzically at me. What's going on is, and this comes out completely clearly in the HRA business plan, is that they're spending very large sums, unusually large sums, on major repairs, increasing over the years, and then that's being immediately written down, and then the depreciation's done on the net book value, so we never ever charge depreciation on that. And I've been asking about it in the Governance and Audit Committee. I've asked the auditors. I've been asking for a couple of years now. I've never received an answer. And I think the HRA, that's an accounting, it's a paper technical thing to a certain extent. But when it comes to this capital expenditure programme, we're spending large sums of money, we're building up debt, and I don't think that when you look at your prudential indicators properly on a normal interest cover basis, I don't think it's sustainable. I think we're going into deeper debt without the ability to repay it.
Just on the MRP, on the major repairs reserve. So the HRA doesn't calculate depreciation the same way the general fund does. So they use componentisation in order to be able to use that depreciation almost to go into a reserve. That reserve is then used to deliver either repaying your borrowing, building more, or repairing what you've got. So it does account for it, and it has to, and it's a line in the HRA that you should see every single year. It has to. The actual expenditure is a different figure because it probably features within their capital programme, and that's why you can't see the actual expenditure going out. But you'll see it as a line within the I&E account within the HRA. And just on the HRA borrowing, at the moment you've got assets of about 1.2 billion. Your outstanding borrowing you've got at the moment is about 14% of that 1.2 billion. By the time you get to the end of the 30-year business plan, your borrowing is about 4% at the current level. So if you think about your own house, when you borrow, it's a very small percentage. And I can tell you now, when I first entered into housing finance and I went to a CITFA course, the first thing that the guy said was, of course, no one pays down their borrowing in the HRA. Nobody does it because you wouldn't, because you've got an asset that's going up in value because it's housing, and essentially your borrowing stays the same, and no authority repays their borrowing. It would be foolish to do that, provided you can service your interest. And at 14% on a £1.2 billion asset base, it's quite a small amount. So there's very small risk.
So when we come, all those things I understand and agree, but that cost is never accounted for. It's in the accounts, it's very complicated and there's figures weaving all over the place. In the HRA business plan, it is absolutely blatant. It's completely clear that you never look at those things. Then you calculate your interest cover. So what matters is whether you've got enough income to cover your interest. And they tell us we're aiming for, we're below it now, even on this basis. You're aiming for 125% cover. But they're doing that on a before major repairs cost basis. So the result is that our debt goes up and up and up to it's about 465 million in the HRA at the end of the HRA business plan. And it'll keep on going up. They managed to make it look as if it levels off on the graph. mainly because they've actually cut back on the major repairs programme in the later years. They've not inflated it like they've inflated everything else. But basically, in the early years, that interest cover ratio is actually getting worse at the beginning, and then you just never generate enough cash to pay the interest. It's the same point as I'm making all along. As soon as you start looking at the cash, instead of fiddling around with the reserves, you get something that looks completely different. And I think we could have an accounting problem, but it's only paper. Doing this levels of capital expenditure on the HRA, I feel, is irresponsible. And when we come to look at the HRA budget, we'll see it's only a sliver of surplus that we've got as buffer if we have got this wrong.
Chair, I'm happy to have Wayne explain again, but we've just had quite a straightforward and concise explanation from Wayne. We have also had Savil's expertise on depreciation and their view last time when we were at governance and audit. And I'm very happy to hear Wayne respond again to William now if he wants to. But as much as both David and I have said before, William, we appreciate the constructive critique. The language you use at times it may be muddled in your mind, and you may say it weaves all over the place, but Wayne is explaining there what is done in terms of HRA finances, and it is in line with the SIPFA code. And I would caution against your version of the truth coming out all of the time. We can continue to have these conversations, continue to ask Savills for their expert opinion. We can continue to ask Wayne and others to explain. But the way you express it sounds as if it is unusual and wrong, when actually we are following the SIPFA guidance. I explained this early on in my presentation earlier about the asset that we have in terms of the 6,000 council homes and the debt we have against it. Wayne has just given a further explanation. I'll go back to Wayne again, but I do think we're at danger of sounding as if we are running this account wrong when we are not. And yes, we are having to balance between investing in housing stock and looking at the maintenance, and we've come to a sort of an agreement where we're trying to get reduce our debt over time by looking at the amount that we can do repairs, which is going to have to decline over time. And we've gone through this HRA business case a number of times. I'll let Wayne finish.
Sorry, Chair, time is now getting very short here. I feel we're spending far too much time listening to one councillor's concerns, and can we please make progress? The meeting should be finishing in 15 minutes' time.
The concerns of any councillor have to be fully explained, and so it's only fair that we don't stifle views from any member of the panel, but we have to listen to what's being said, and it is that the HRA is done differently by sort of government decree from normal commercial sector accounting, and that seems to be causing a significant problem. But I think the point is well known to both sides, and we're not going to make any further progress on it this evening.
I think that's right. Let's move on.
Yep. So how we resolve this, if indeed it ever gets resolved, until such time as HRA accounting is done in the same way as commercial accounting, I think these the arguments will continue.
I think, Chair, we should say that the concerns were expressed about the sustainability of the HRA capital programme, given the slim surplus that's available to it.
And that's your view, that's not mine. Can we move on, please,
So
Chair?
I don't think we're going to get panel agreement to make any sort of reference back to Cabinet on this particular issue at the moment, although there is an issue to be resolved at some time in the future. Are there any further concerns about the capital programme and the HRA? Any questions to our officers? Or are we happy that the assumptions and the computations are correct, except for the points that the disagreement of view. So on that basis, there are a number of additional reports which have been captured by the clerk where we want to see additional material, and we have a record of those.
I've been recording them as they've gone, Mr. Chairman.
Good, okay. And there seem to be no showstoppers. And we've given this a really good kicking as far as I can see. We've been through all the areas of concern, and there are no significant areas that we would wish to report to Cabinet as being of concern. Is that the majority view of the panel?
I would, if that's your proposal, Chair, I would be happy to second it.
Yep.
That's what I said about an hour ago.
Yeah, but every member is entitled to raise issues which they consider are of concern, and they may not be of concern to other members, but that is the way we work, that is the process that we have. We try and resolve and understand and then decide whether, given understanding, there are issues we wish to raise with Cabinet. As far as I can see, there are no such issues this evening, although there are certain accounting issues which we recognise have not yet been resolved, but are well known. So can we take a vote on that? So there are no issues to raise to Cabinet. We then move on to the work programme. Owen, tell us the news on what remains to be done this civic year and how we're going to achieve.
If I may, I'll just brief the panel on what remains and then leave it to the panel to maybe decide how to achieve it, because I don't think it would fall within my powers. We've got 2 meetings of the scrutiny panel remaining for the municipal year, and in addition to that, 1 meeting of the panel as the Crime and Disorder Committee, which I think is fairly simple. The next issue that the panel has to deal with is the 27th of January meeting, where we have proposals put forward, partly following the previous meeting of the panel and what was requested with regard to some extra items and how they were organised, but also some from officers. So the main item was regarding matters to do with the estates team bring forward disposal of assets, and the panel expressed a wish to see an overarching strategy and programme rather than simply having individual asset disposals brought to it piecemeal. So we've got that on the proposal for the work programme for the next meeting on the 27th of January. We have separated out the third-party procurement for asset management delivery functions item at the request of officers, as I was advised that there are specific reasons as to why that needs to be taken separately, and I can circulate those to members if required, but that's what I've been told. Remove the play parks programme, as that one seemed, the panel's view seemed to be that was more of a good news story than something that needed to be scrutinised. We've currently got the Community Asset Fund on there, as we've had at least 1 member say that they wish that to stay on the work programme. It's not certain, in fact maybe unlikely to be ready for the 27th of January, but we put it on there as a placeholder in case it was, in case the panel wished to see it then, and pardon me, if needs be we can move that back to a later meeting. So really I think I'd like to ask the panel to give us an indication about how panel members wish us to proceed with regards to the 27th of January meeting, because there's a lot there. Obviously we've got the potential for having another look at the budget as a later stage of the process. How the panel wish to deal with these weighty items, I'll leave it to them and I can answer any questions, hopefully.
it just looks too busy to do serious scrutiny of that. I mean, if we're just going to nod them through, you know, read and approved, fine. But if we're going to start asking questions and probing, it always takes time. And if it's possible to split it into two sensible meetings, or because we can't mix crime and disorder and scrutiny panel work, and presumably there'll be quite a few people wishing to turn up and speak at the crime and disorder as usual. So it looks as though if there is another date available.
So, Mr. Chairman, if we can take this in chunks, so given that I think the panel view is that there are too many items there to deal with one meeting, if the panel's happy for me to go away and try and find an extra date around about that time frame to schedule in an extra meeting.
That agreed? Yep.
Agreed, and possibly we might look to move the portfolio holder briefing to the February meeting.
Yep.
Would that, sorry, to the 12th of February. Oh, sorry.
March, yeah.
So,
yep.
Just if it's helpful, I mean, you do the portfolio holder briefings because they're good practice, but they're not, you know, they're not a function you have to do. So the portfolio holder briefing is the one that you know, could always be one that you could push off into the future or decide you don't want to do if you need to find time. The other thing I would say, while they're three separate items, they are all linked to kind of asset management. The strategy will be a big discussion. The moot hall is a fairly kind of contained area that, provided you've, you know, seen in advance and had time and at briefing, you know, other questions could come around that. The third party procurement as well is probably a more contained one. And if the community asset fund, you know, whether it's ready or not, you could push that off as well, which might mean that, because I do think finding another meeting in that small window is going to be quite challenging. So that might be a plan B if you can't find another meeting, is to knock those items off and just condense it.
brings me on to just the second question I wish to ask. Reading the room, trying to get would the panel be of the view that they would like us to schedule a second round of budget consideration to add to that? Because I'm taking it that probably is the case, but...
Most certainly. I mean, that is a sort of key function of this particular panel, to scrutinise the budget. So and given that there are quite a few areas where we were asking for information which is not quite ready yet, and won't be ready until after the government settlement is fully known. I mean, there may be really significant changes in the budget by after government has pronounced. So I think we should assume that we will want another look at the budget when we see it in its splendid glory.
I think, Chair, it's looking like we need another meeting.
Yeah.
So, assuming I can find another meeting date, would members be happy if we try and keep that free for the budget matters alone, to give us give the panel a full tilt at it?
Yeah, I think we don't at this moment, we don't understand how drastic things are going to be, and if it happens that the settlement is favourable and very little is going to change from what's assumed at the moment, it may be a quick process. If on the other hand all the money goes up north and we've got next to nothing, then it may be a far more interesting meeting to scrutinise the budget again. So I think we don't know. We should just assume that we will need a meeting to look at it.
So just to lay it out, we will try and find a second meeting date. We will provisionally schedule that for budget alone, depending on settlements and how contentious that might be. We'll cancel the portfolio holder briefing for economic growth and transformation from the 27th of January. And then if there are any changes, any updates, to say a very unexpected conclusion to the settlement from the fairer funding, if we could have delegation to the chairman and group leads for discussion about how we then look at any changes.
That sounds very sensible. Is that agreeable? Yep, thank you. We have 30 seconds left. In that case, can I wish you a safe journey home and hope you've not contracted anything unfortunate during the course of this meeting. Thank you.